Welcome, everyone, to the Feminine Outliers podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Zelda Wasau
and Cholwe Mandona.
And we are excited to have you here with us. So welcome back to another episode. I'm really hoping that you guys have been enjoying the Feminine Outliers podcast so far. We are excited to bring you another good episode today. As you can see in the title, we are going to be talking about representation in the media. And this is a topic that has a lot to unpack. And there's a lot that we can dive into and talk about a lot of interesting things. But first, as per usual, we are going to start with our unlearning pieces for the week. So I will go first. And I will say what I have been unlearning. So this week I've been unlearning being impatient and not enjoying the process or the journey. I feel like when it comes to results, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm living in the US now, but it's like sometimes you just want results now. It's like now and now and now. But it takes time for some things to, some results to come. It takes time for, things to result and come to a conclusion, or for you to get what you want. Some things, yeah, you can get them quickly and easy. There's also a lot of things in life that are not just, sudden gratification. It's like delayed gratification, and you have to wait and persevere to get there. And so in the meantime, as you're waiting and persevering to get there, I think it's so important to enjoy the process, which is something, again, I've been unlearning because I have not really been enjoying the process for some things, because it's so easy to focus on, I don't yet have the results I want. I don't yet have the ending that I want, and get really discouraged and tired to be where you are currently. But you forget that the journey is part of the process, and you need to embrace the journey, be patient, and keep up what you're doing to eventually get results. And it's funny because you'd think, and generally I am a very patient person, but you'd think I'd have this down pat because I'm a classic example of someone who waited, in the sense that I went through medical school, 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency before I could finally say I'm an attending physician. A lot of people look and they're like, how did you persevere that? How did you stick through it, through the thick and the thin and the tough things? And I'm like, well, I kind of knew where I was heading, and I had to be patient with that. But I also I'm not going to lie, I did make the most out of the process because, I traveled a lot. However I could, I tried to enjoy time with my friends, my colleagues, and for some reason in medicine that was not an issue. But in a lot of other aspects in my life, it can be a bit of an issue, because in my head I'm like, well, this doesn't happen now. Why hasn't it happened now? And you'd think I would just be very used to waiting and being patient and enjoying the process. But I have to remind myself that sometimes, because it's really easy to forget and just be really grumpy and mad at the process. But the process is part of the journey that gets you to whatever goals you are aiming for. And yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that reminder, Zell.
You're welcome.
I know. Oh gosh, it is very real. And surprisingly, I had a similar unlearning. So I don't know if, like, I guess I'm going to respond to what you're saying with what my unlearning is, which is change is instant. So I am unlearning that unlearning that change is instant. So um, from what you are saying is enjoy the process. It's a journey, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to think if I, decided and I did something, then I'm supposed to reap the rewards right there and then. And again, going back to the example that I give is around fitness because I'm on this journey and I'm just learning a lot about not just about fitness, but about life and how it actually works and things like that. So, the first time like I went on my workout, like the first time I did a really intense workout, there's this feeling that I got that felt like, oh man, I really pushed hard and I really ate well that day. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe I've lost some weight. No, the scale doesn't change the same day. Who was I fooling around, right? Like this is no, that's not how it works. Um, but also, even now, 9 months into my workout program, I there's just so much that I didn't know about fitness. The techniques, the way you're supposed to do things, the amount of rest you should have between workouts, the kind of protein that's good for you, like the best for you. Like I did not think about it. Um, and so the better way that I think about it now is change is just a decision. But once you make that decision, there's a whole lot of um, things that are gonna, come your way that you have to deal with. So when I made the decision to be physically fit, I didn't realize the other things that would come with it. So there's almost this thing like I kind of I don't want to be the person that brings things down, but like there's almost this thing that you're never arriving because even though
Mm-hmm.
I've made like even though I've made the decision to be physically fit, it's not the fitness, it's more than that. Like it's so funny because the other day I was just walking around town and I've noticed that I have started to have an affinity to go to stores that have sports clothing like Lululemon, like I and I think it's because maybe that's the outfit like the kind of outfit I wear going to the gym and I see other people wearing. So I can see how my mind is geared towards these things now. So I don't know, there's just it's a process. It's like it's not a destination. Um and I used to be that person who would say like, why does a store like Lululemon exist? Because the clothes are really pricey. But then there are some people that really love working out and really want good clothing with their working out. But I totally get what you're saying, Zell. Um, and yeah, I guess I have a question for you because I basically answered it with my unlearning piece, but uh, do you think your impatience comes from the idea that you think it should be easier because it's not mid school, it's not it's not something that is requires studying. And so maybe do you think you may have the narrative that it's supposed to be easier and change should happen faster?
Ah, actually, nope. I've never thought about it like that.
Mm,
I think it's just more so how I'm feeling in the moment, or if I feel like like I'm ready for something, and I'm just like, why is it not here? Um,
mm,
and so, or if I've been working at something and it just hasn't bore any fruit, I don't think it's related to medicine at all. The only way I compare it with medicine is just that medicine is really about delayed gratification, and really you have to really see the light at the end of the tunnel because you're in
yeah.
that tunnel for so long. And so I figured if I went through that, it should be easy to go through other things. But it's just but it's some things are just not, straightforward, and you have to, the process takes you up and down, and you have to go through the hoops and all that. But it's just, I guess it's
Yeah.
just part of life, because one of the things that has frustrated me that has been in the process is my hair, because I felt like my hair has not been growing or retaining length. But
Mm.
then I actually realized as of January, it's probably because I was iron deficient. And now I've noticed a change in my hair. And I
Mm.
was like, wow, wait a minute. So all this time I've been getting so frustrated. And because my body was like, there's no iron. So I'm not sending it up to the hair, because that's the
Mm.
least place I mean, you don't need it.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things in which it was really frustrating. But I'm still trying to be
Mhm.
patient and know, okay, my hair will get to where I want it to get to.
Mhm.
Um, but it's still gonna be frustrated, because you're like, it's been years. Why is it
Yeah.
like, why has this been going on for the same time? So I think because I feel like by now I should have reached a certain milestone with it. That's what
Mhm.
frustrates me more. I think in medicine the difference is, if everything goes as planned or the way you plan, you can kind of guesstimate when you're going to be done with residency or fellowship, depending on what you want to do. That's if everything goes as
Right.
planned. You'll know, I'll be in this for 4 years, this for another 4 years, this for 5, 6, 3, 2 years, whatever. So you kind
Mhm.
of have you know, this kind of like a date that you're going
Mhm.
by. Maybe these other things, you don't necessarily have a date. So it's just like, when will it actually happen? It's kind of left
Mm.
up and open in the air. Yeah.
Yeah. That does make a lot of sense. And so, and yeah, and we were talking about self-sabotage the other week. So you could be doing yeah, you could be doing a lot of things right, but there could be something that you're doing that's n- regressing your progress, like, like, so I
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, the realities of life, Zell. I get that.
Yeah. Hashtag
I
life.
get
I mean, life is just a big one big maze.
it
And
is.
you just have to deal with whatever gets thrown at you, whatever twists and turns.
Exactly.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
But this is a good time to segue into um, our topic of the day, which is representation in the media. So
Mm.
we are kind of going to break this down. We're going to start off with our backgrounds with this in regards to how we grew up and how media, you know, how representation was in the media when we were kids. And we'll segue into adults, and then we'll segue into a lot of different things, because there's a lot of different things that we can talk about. And would also love to hear you guys' opinions on all of this, like representation in the media and all, and how it affects you. So, like, for me growing up, I had access to American TV, but also
Mm.
TV from around the world. I don't know. We had DSTV. I don't know if you had DSTV in Zambia.
Yep.
Oh, you
DSTV show.
do? Okay.
I see.
Yeah. So we had DSTV. So I think with that, I had access to some other shows in like Africa, particularly. I think they would show Nigerian shows, they show South Africa and stuff. And then I remember watching Big
Mm.
Brother Africa. I used to love Big
Yes.
Brother Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's and of course they'd always show like they'd show European like soccer, things like that. Then a lot of American TV shows. But
Mm-hmm.
then also because I grew up in Kenya, I grew up seeing, news anchors and everything, all who are Kenyan. And also there were
Mm-hmm.
shows on the TV that were Kenyan shows, done in either English or Swahili. A lot of them were done in a mixture. Some were just pure Swahili. So I grew up kind of seeing both, like the Kenyan um, TV, and then also seeing, American TV and other international TV. But American TV tends to be the one I remember the most.
Mhm.
And what I remember, so two different things. So what I remember about Kenyan TV was, I guess, it was a little bit more traditional at the time, like how, like,
Mm.
particularly how, like, the women had to dress, particularly like the news anchors and things like that. And initially, they also were not the most, like, how do I say? I didn't realize there's an issue with colorism in Kenya. It's not as bad as other
Mm.
countries, but there's also the issue with that. And so, who would they would choose for news anchors would probably be lighter skinned Kenyans
Mm.
at
Mm.
some point, but then it also changed at some point. I saw, by the time I was like a teenager, there was a mixture of everyone. But I was able to see, it was normal for me to see Kenyans, and Kenyans are like, it was normal for me to see Black Africans on TV and stuff. And then when I watch American TV, I remember thinking, so here's my one of my pet peeves. When they show
Mm.
America outside of America, they show America like this is the best place to live. Like, that's
Mm.
the news we get. Like, everything we get
Mm.
from there. You don't get
Mhm.
as much about the bad stuff, um
Mhm.
in as much as you get the good stuff. Like, when you get the bad stuff, you hear about the gun problem in America, and if people tell you what they envision in America, they envision like some, guy, some white man with a gun or something. That's an image that comes into a lot of people's minds when it comes to America, because that's when you think about a bad image, that's what shows up. But that doesn't show
Mm.
up even often. It was mostly
Mhm.
like the wealth, um they have big houses, the lifestyle, the celebrity culture. Celebrity culture was really big.
Yeah.
We could follow all the shows and stuff like that. But it is funny because I've always had a affinity for longer hair. And I think I told you this
Mhm.
earlier. Like, I love longer hair. I still have no clue where it came from. But I
Mm.
suspect partially might have come from the media, because at that time I remember seeing African or Black Americans on the TV, and they would have like this long hair, long, beautiful hair. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my goodness. I think I told my mom once, oh, I like their hair. I wish I had their hair. I did not realize.
Yes.
I had no
Yeah.
clue it was those were just wigs or weaves that were done really well.
Right.
No
Yeah.
clue. In my head, I was like,
Mhm.
these are like, these are their this is their hair. I said, in my head, I was like, oh, they have such nice hair. Why do they have such nice hair? No.
Mhm.
The I always remember that. So I remember
Mhm.
all the time looking at their shows, and I'm just like, why do they have such nice hair?
Mhm.
Um, so that's like pretty much like a lot of what I remember growing up. Like, I'd watch the celebrity culture shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Um, I don't remember which other shows I'd watched. I'm pretty sure I watched some other ones. And it was just interesting. I'd be like, sometimes it makes you envy the US, the way the way
Yes.
they portray stuff. It just gives the US such a positive outlook. And for me, I tended to get a more like balanced view, because my parents also, I mean, they watch news every day.
Mm.
And they were watching, what were they watching? We'd watch channels like Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC. We watch news all on all these channels, so you would kind of get a balanced view on what's going on in other parts of the world as well.
Mm. Yeah.
So, I kind of grew up with that, and knowing, oh, this is happening in this country in the Middle East, this is happening in Asia, blah blah blah. So
Mhm.
I felt like I had a somewhat balanced, but then I still feel like when they showed anything to do with the West, it was positive. It was like imbalanced it was more leaning towards the positive side. That's all they'd show. I had no clue
Mhm.
at that time how they portrayed Africa in general, because I was in
Mm.
Africa, and I did not know how they portrayed Africa that time.
Yeah.
But that was pretty
Yeah.
much that's my experience with growing up. What about yours, Cholwe?
It's actually very similar. It's so funny you reminded me of DSTV. Shout out to DSTV.
Right? Right? Is it a South African company?
I think it
Well,
is, yeah. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, because that was the way that we could access, as you said, to international television, like American television. Um, yeah, but also locally, like as you said, South African television and things going on in other parts of Africa. So that was our main form of access, and also I would like to acknowledge that that was to some degree a privilege, because you had to pay,
That's
right?
true.
Um, to you had to pay for these services, because if you couldn't pay for those services, you were just subjected to the local TV channels.
Hmm.
Um, and what I remember about the local TV channels is that they would stop transmission by like midnight or something like that, like 11:59. Like all of a sudden, you're watching TV, it just goes, the multicolored bands show up, and it's like, it's you're done. um and DSTV never had that limitation, so you could keep watching past midnight. And so, yeah. But when you just said representation in the media, like my initial word that came to mind was Hollywood. um
Mm.
Despite the exposure to other cultures on TV, as you said, the American culture was very strong. I mean, even to this day, when it's Christmas time, I have this urge to watch Home Alone. Like, I'm just like, I just want to watch Home Alone 1, 2, and 3. And my favorite is Home Alone 2. Um, and yes, and I just have this picture of like New York. It really shaped my idea of New York. and
Mm.
and even when I yeah, like even when I first went to New York, like the first movie that came to my mind, because it was so ingrained in me very early on, was Home Alone. um and you hit the nail on the head. I thought about the hair, like whenever there would be like that one black woman, especially like I can't remember the shows exactly, but if it's, let's say, a black female character in like one of the teenage shows, I would always like be looking at that. I'll always be like looking at her and be like, wow, she's so pretty. And she has long hair, and like, and they made life seem very simple. Like, you go to
Hmm.
school and you have all these cool friends and you hang out in the cafeteria. For me, like, I noticed the shoes, like the Converse, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
Converse. I was obsessed. I was like, I really like those shoes, and if I make it to the US, I didn't even think that it was such a big deal until when I moved to the US. That was on my mind. I wanted to buy Converse shoes, and I bought a pair, I think about a year into the US, and I had these amazing red Converse shoes that I was just like, I'm living my childhood dream, um, of wearing these Converse shoes, and I wore those shoes.
Hmm.
Um, and because that was the thing, the shows I watched was kids going to school, and then they go home and they have this like beautiful, they go, their home is in this beautiful setup where there are trees on either side of the street, the cars are parked so beautifully, and then they walk on this sidewalk into this big nice house, and or they get off the school bus, and then they get home and they have snacks. I don't know, like, it was just it seemed just like picture perfect.
Mhm.
Um and that wasn't my case, right? Because like school was uniform, and in American movies they never wore uniforms, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. You don't they don't have to do these things that we have to do.
Mhm.
So yeah. So that was a thing. And then the magazines as well, the teenage magazines.
Oh
Uh
yeah.
yeah, like
That's so
looking through.
true.
Yeah, the teenage magazines. Like it was just so cool to me, like how someone could be so young and famous, like young, famous, pretty, and like have everything together. Like that was the image I was getting. And it didn't necessarily give me this sense of like, oh, I could be like them. It felt like there was me and then there was them. Um because I just like to me I was just like with the hair thing, right? I was just like, how would I ever get to have that hair? Like I just won't be able to have that hair. So it was almost like just looking through this crystal ball and just like, yeah, okay, that's someone else's world, and just admire, like envy. Like, unfortunately, I have to use this word, but it was like, it never made me feel as like good of myself. It just made me realize like I got like the bad end of the stick, if that makes sense, which is pretty sad now that I look back. But yeah.
Mm. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. And that's my biggest problem with media is how they represent things is very biased. And so
Mm-hmm.
you were made to feel like the West or America is like heaven. That's how
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of portrayed. And so that's why we grow up feeling like we want to go to America so bad. Life is going to be great. I remember thinking, oh, I can't wait to come to America. Life is going to be great. I don't know. I seem so naive. Anyways, like the naivety of a child. This is why you need parents, because you need someone to
Mm-hmm.
take care of you because you're so naive. But like, yeah, I remember that. And so now transitioning to coming to the US and coming here, oh my goodness, this opened myself to a whole new world. Because
Mm.
when I came here, this is the first time I was actually exposed to how the West, I mean, not the first time, but the first time I was properly exposed to how the West views Africa. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, Africa is a continent, guys. And I'm trying not to generalize, but for this case in point, we just have to say Africa because that's exactly how the media portrays the continent of Africa. And
Mm.
it's like, I would see like American news and stuff, and which American news, I think you mentioned at some point, they focus a lot on themselves. But then when they
Mm-hmm.
show something that's happening outside of America, it tends to be very negative for lots of, unless it's
Mm.
in Europe, it tends to be very
Mm-hmm.
negative. And so in Africa, I mean, when I talk to people in college and stuff, they get so like amazed. You're from Africa? They don't even ask where in Africa. For them, the fact that you're from Africa, and then you start getting all the weird questions, and you start to realize it's coming from the media, because all they
Mm.
show when they show any African countries, they show an African country that's currently undergoing war, famine, or some
Mhm.
kind of negative thing. That's all they show. They For the most part
Mhm.
they don't show positive stuff. Like they would show, if they show positive stuff, they'd show patient going on a safari, person going on a safari or
Mhm.
something like that. But they would not show much of the positive stuff. And that was the first time for me seeing this. And for me it's confusing because hey, I'm coming from this Africa that you're calling backward and all. And yet it would surprise the American students that I know all the shows they're talking about. Like I know everything they're talking about because I have access to all of it back
Mhm.
home. And
Yeah.
just coming here is when like I started to realize, oh my goodness, we have a problem. Like Houston, we have a problem because the media is very, I started to realize the media is very biased and it's a propaganda tool. Whether we accept the fact or not, It is.
Yeah.
Because how
Yeah.
they portray things is so, it boggles my mind. Like, I started to see how Americans think the way they think because
Yeah.
I don't know, media makes them think they're everything. Then
Mm.
nothing is better than America. And then
Yeah.
when they show anything outside of America, they show the worst part. Like when they show Mexico, you think like when you think Mexico, you think drug lord, drug
Right.
lords or like cartels. When
Cartels, yeah.
you think Colombia, you think about the drug lords. When you think
Mhm.
it's just, and I'm just like, if you think Europe, they show nicely. They portray them really nicely in the media.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere else, oh, there's a lot of issues with a lot of
Everyone
other
has
places.
everyone
Like,
has problems. Yeah. Yeah.
and I just used to wonder, like, what is happening? And it's really confusing for those of us who come from places where you have access to media that's a little bit more well balanced.
Mm.
Because I would see issues and stuff. Like also when you watch these news channels, they don't just show the good in America too. They'd also
Mm.
show the bad in America. 'Cause I told you my parents love their news. They watch it
Mhm.
faithfully every day. So I would just be like, so I had a more well balanced view. And then I'm coming here and I'm seeing everything is so out of balance. That was a bit of a
Mm.
shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so funny. My Houston, we have a problem is when I saw a pothole when I arrived in the US.
You're like, I thought the rose was supposed to be perfect.
I know. I know. It distorted my image. I was like, we have a problem. Like, what is a pothole? Like, I know it sounds so small, but I was like, yeah, what happened to the perfect roads that I saw in the movie? And I was just like, we have a problem. Something is off. Um and so that was just the beginning of like, oh, oh, okay. So
I'll remember that one.
no, seriously. Because I just really, as you said, it the image that was carried was heaven on earth. Um, yeah. So, and speaking about the media as well, I guess in the US, one thing I noticed is it's definitely focused around celebrity media, like
Mm,
internal celebrities or things that are going on, like pop culture,
right.
um, and political culture as well. Like it's very internal. So um when I would speak with my family back home and they would say, oh, some this is what's happening maybe back home or somewhere else in another country, it always felt like, huh, I didn't, okay, like that's happening. um it always felt so far, I felt so distant from that reality. um because I'm dealing with, I don't know, the Kardashians going to a beach party. I don't know. Like it was just so like, oh, and almost in the way that, like, in my mind I was like, cuz I was so it felt like I was so distant. I was just like, oh, that's sad. Um and I didn't even know how I could respond to it. Um because it just felt, I felt so far off from it.
I guess it's interesting because you come here and your image, like you see what they show you of America is not the entire truth.
Mhm.
It's far from the truth. Like there is definitely parts of America like that, but they don't show you the whole or everything. And you come here and you realize, wow, it was a lie. You feel like you literally feel like it was a lie. And it's not necessarily a lie.
Mhm.
It's just that they only show you a tidbit, the tidbit that
Yeah.
works for them, and then everything else,
Right.
they don't show you. But the
Yeah.
pothole story, I'll remember. That's funny. That was funny. Um, so now that we have more, of a background and stuff, I mean, we've talked about what we can talk about more specific. This is just going to be free for all. You could say whatever is on your mind, surely. When you
Mm,
just think about, the problems with and the benefits. Let's not
mm,
forget of representation in um, media. One of the things that that I will say when I think about representation in media is I did not realize how powerful or impactful it is to see someone who looks like yourself
mm,
on the media and being successful and in high positions. The reason why
mhm,
I say that is because I mean, growing up in a country that's primarily made up of black people, you see black people on TV, you see black successful people, it's just normal, right?
mhm.
And
Yeah.
when I came here and I would see how black Americans would respond or react to a black successful person being portrayed in the media, it used to initially mind boggle me because I'm like, what's surprising about that? I'm like, because I'm
Mhm,
used to things. I'm like, for me, it's regular. But then when I started to really understand more about the culture in the US and how the history of racism and all that, is when I
mhm,
understood where they're coming from and how for them they don't have a lot of representation. At least now it's much better. But back in the
mhm.
day, there wasn't that much. Like even when you think about Disney, like I
Oh,
love Disney,
yes.
but then I mean, as a kid, I never thought about some of the connotations or anything because I mean, I was innocent, naive. I was growing up in a black country, so it never occurred to me. But I feel when you look at some of these things, some of the older Disney stuff, and you're like, why is the help black or something like that? Like it's just things
Mm,
start to add up now, and I s- now we have like Disney princesses that are black, but they never
mhm,
had that beforehand. It never bothered me though. I'm not gonna lie, it never bothered me because again, I was in a country surrounded by beautiful, amazing black people. But I
mm,
can see how it would bother black Americans because they are not exposed to that. Like, I mean, you don't
mhm.
see that. And I
Yeah.
honestly, it made me realize the privilege I have in the sense of growing up out of this country because I did not like even though I saw the same media they did, it didn't affect me the same way.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's very true, Zell. I was actually thinking as you were saying because I did like the Disney um like stories. Like my favorite was Rapunzel, and I didn't realize, yeah, Rapunzel was probably white, and like it wasn't like Rapunzel with 4C long hair, like so it was it was it was a different different image. But this is why I actually like the show Blackish, if you've ever watched it.
I loved
uh
that show. Loved it.
I love it. I don't know if it's still on or it probably ended,
I think
but
it ended.
yeah, it did. Yeah, it was so good. Like even the just the whole theme of it, like where it was this black family that moved into a very well-to-do neighborhood, and they were just living their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked how they showcased, like the neighbors not feeling, like comfortable with them being around. Like they would I mean, they weren't per se racist, but they would have tendencies where they're like checking up on them, or like this idea of like, okay, black family in the neighborhood. But yeah, that was it's just they're just Black people trying to live their life. They have jobs. They need to feed their kids, and so I felt like it gave this balanced representation where it's like, yes, we want the same things. It's there's no difference there. So that's what you're reminding me of, and yeah, I really like that show.
It was a great show. And I think the reason why I liked it is because it just, as you said, it just showed a regular black family living their life and not struggling. Because the narrative you get is in this part of the world is black people are struggling. It doesn't matter whether it's black American, African, that's the narrative you get. And that's the narrative
Hmm.
that show also on movies and all that stuff. So just to see this like family doing well, successful, living in the suburbs, I that was actually the one like Black American show that I could really relate with
Mm.
because I felt like that was my like I lived a regular life like that. Because a lot of the
Mhm.
other shows, if they show stuff with anyone like in the ghetto or someone who comes from a rags to riches story or like is using sports to
Yes.
get better or something, I could not relate to those
Mm.
because I felt like I
Yeah.
had just an average upbringing. But yes, that was a great show. I
Mhm.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And you mentioned it earlier that there seems to be a narrative for every continent. So Africa is
Hmm.
associated with poverty. Not that it doesn't exist, but the image of it is okay, we're gonna showcase, kids who do not have so much, and are in need of, food, or they don't have access to medical care. And again, that is true, but like the as you said, the image of suffering, um and then other places, like Europe. We all know you have to go to the Eiffel Tower. If you haven't been to Paris, you haven't been anywhere else in the world. You know, like if you haven't been to Italy, you haven't had the best wine or pizza. Like there's there's each there is and if you even notice, like to some degree, a lot of it is the specific, very specific countries. Switzerland, we know about the Swiss Alps. I didn't even have to take a geography class to know about Switzerland. It's just the marketing. And then there's Italy, then there's France, then there's Spain, and then there's Portugal. But there are beautiful places in Romania. People don't even know that. In Lithuania, yeah, like
Lithuania,
there,
yeah.
like there are all these other countries in Europe, that we don't even hear about, as well. So we just have there's just a specific image, even in the movies. If Have you ever noticed that, if it's a European, like, I don't know, uh drug dealer, let's say, quote unquote, or is doing some crime, they're always in suits. They're in suits, and they're carrying briefcases, and their guns have silencers, so you never hear them shooting. It's not too dramatic. Um and it's a specific nationality, the accent, everything. And I just like and it just carries that image. And as you said, and then when it comes to, let's say, American movies, the drug dealer looks a specific type of way, and you might be in the wrong part of the neighborhood, and I don't know. So there's just and this goes on and on and on and on.
Hmm.
And so when people say things like the Russian spies, like they crack a joke, and like, no, it's because that's what they've been exposed to,
Hmm.
which is not the case. Or the starving kids in Africa, like they're also starving kids in the US, they're starving kids in Europe, they're starving kids in Asia. So people now, you start to see people referencing, people in those contexts, and it just stays with people, and people don't question, and that's really an issue, is that people never challenge what they are receiving from the media, so it makes it harder to break the messaging.
That's hmm, that's my biggest problem. I kind of see why I can partially see why we don't question the media, because you kind of just you feel like you want to trust them because you feel like if they're showing you something, it should be like well vetted and like truthful, or like even like news and stuff. That's
Mm-hmm.
how it's kind of that feeling of, you kind of have this feeling of trust when you think about the media. But then I always think about, what's that name? The guy who was on the Stephen Bartlett thingy, the guy, the CIA guy, who says that
Oh, yeah.
most of us are meant to be sheep, and it's only a few who break free from that. And the
Mm,
thing is that, and this just falls perfectly into that, because if you say like, no, I actually feel like the media is being very divisive, and they actually they're very purposeful about what type of media they bring out. Someone would be
mm,
like, conspiracy theory. But the more you think about it, why do they bring out similar kind of things? Even when they show things in media, why do they cast certain people for certain roles? Why do they do, these messaging? There's this, was it subliminal, something like that. Sorry about my
mm-hmm,
pronunciation. But there's this message that's coming in that you're not, it's not like hitting you in the face, but you actually end up registering it when
mm-hmm,
you see certain people and certain roles and all that. The message comes through in a very
mm-hmm,
inconspicuous subliminal way, like you don't realize it. And that's a really effective scary way, because you don't see it, but it's
mm-hmm,
it's coming through. It's coming
mm-hmm,
through, and and the funny thing is that, a lot of countries in the world are relatively like free to, like, you're free to move around, right?
mm-hmm.
And why are we still having this issue with people like just blindly following the media and not trying to go and see places for themselves? Because I don't know if I told you, but I recently got into North Korea and its documentary. Like, I got so intrigued by North Korea. Like, my history geek side is coming out again. And part of the reason why North Korea has been such a successful dictatorship is because they have locked down the media. Like,
Mm,
everything they show, there are very few people who have internet because it barely exists. But the very few people who have internet, everything is being controlled by the government. So what you hear, what they say, everything. That's why these people don't revolt, because they don't even know that they're like slaves in their own country, because the
mm.
media is that well tightly controlled. And that to me scares me, because it shows me the power of the media.
Yeah, it
It
does.
shows the power of the media. And you already see the power of the media here in the US, because we are talking about how representation is an issue. If we, if you as a white child don't see a black successful person in the media, you probably just assume all black people are not successful, because you don't
Mm-hmm.
see it. Because children, we're so malleable, and we can learn from a lot of these things. And so I feel like that's a big issue in general. And even when I watch the news channels, if you just watch the news, like if you watch, what is it, NBC, you might get a slightly different story from NBC to Fox News to CBC, because they support different people. And so the way they spin a story might be a bit
Mm-hmm.
different. And the way they
Mm-hmm.
spin the story will give you a different outlook on what happened. And I'm just like, this is so crazy that it's so powerful and we don't know that it's so powerful.
No, exactly. 100%. And you reminded me of you just said it about how the story about the athlete, the who goes professional, or who becomes really big in the sports industry. And then there's not much representation on other, let's say, black people that just become, professionals in the everyday world. Like, let's say ourselves, like medical
Mm-hmm.
doctor, engineer, like lawyer, accountant. Because what ends up happening is that um, you see these images and you say, well, no, I need to be like LeBron James. And people then start thinking if they're not LeBron James, then they cannot be anything else. And it's probably not as good enough because the whole world is not watching you when it's not really supposed to be the case. Um, these are very extreme cases or very, very special, talented individuals. And so the idea that you need to be extreme to be happy or be successful is not the case. And I think the media tends to, yeah, magnify that. Um, and so they are, and if you think about it, they're very, you, to some degree, like you can kind of count, I want to say, the people that are represented continuously on media, I mean in the media, but we totally forget about the people who are just living a normal life but they're making
Mm-hmm.
big impacts in their community. So that's it's very unfortunate, to in that way, if you think about it.
Wow. Chol, we're having a part two, right?
Yes. But before we conclude though, I'm thinking we should leave our audience with like maybe some tips and tricks on what should we do, because in a way we can't escape it. Um
Mm-hmm.
but at least we can do something maybe for ourselves or with our friends, because at the same time, once in a while, like after work on a Friday, for example, over the weekend, I like to chill and watch a movie. So there is a what can I say, it is it's a way of relaxing, to like to appreciate the art of film, and you know see things, like just to escape my own reality. So it serves a purpose. But yeah, but the other stuff that makes people think that there's another reality, how do we advise our audience, our listeners, on what we can, on what we are doing, or what they could do?
Hmm. I mean, I'm going to try and shorten my answer as much as possible.
Mm.
I think this is something we can also talk about in part two, really in depth. But because I realized I can go off with this one. So keep me in check.
Okay. All right. I'll keep you. I have a timer. Yeah.
I feel like this might sound bad, but like you have to question, like don't just blindly follow or listen to things. Question
Mm.
some things or try to think for yourself. One, if you're told the sky is like, because I'm pretty sure, like, if you're told the sky is red, you'll know, like, no, the sky is not red. But I'm sure there's some people who they just blindly follow and they just listen and they're like, yeah, okay, the sky is red. But have you questioned, is it truly red? So I
Mm.
feel like when you get information from the media, like, let's talk news wise, for example,
Mhm.
try and watch different news channels. Don't just watch the one news channel that feeds into your belief system, which has been, which you might not believe, but we're all biased in a way. So your belief system is probably biased. So open up a different news channel that you would not usually read, watch, read. If it's a newspaper you're reading or whatever, listening to a radio, do a new, go to a new place you've not been to. See what they
Mm.
have to say, see their interpretation. Go with an open mind and just
Mhm.
truly listen, because you might find there might be some inconsistencies that will somehow meet in the middle that can kind of help you see that it might not be what I'm being shown is not necessarily all that there is to the story, for example.
Mm-hmm.
In the media, um, just because they portray people in a certain way doesn't mean that that's all they have to be. And this world, one thing we need to stop doing is trying to put people in boxes. Because
Yeah.
who is it benefiting? It's
Mm.
not benefiting us, most of us for the most part, if someone is trying to put you in a box. And that's the whole thing. In your head, you're like, okay, this person can only fit this role, or this person is what this. Don't put people in a box. Try and just see what the person is going to give you. Like, it might be hard if based off your background, what you grew up with and stuff, but hold it in and just see who the person is, what they have to tell you. You'll be surprised. You
Mm-hmm.
put this person in this box, and they totally do not fit in that box. They're in a total different world or realm than you would have anticipated. It's just
Mm.
honestly trying not to feel like just realizing you don't have everything figured out.
Right.
And the media in it will try and convince you the way they want you to. Even children's cartoons, there have been issues with those ones in the past because of the messaging they give, which I don't know, as a child I don't probably remember that, but you start to realize as an adult, wait a minute, you're like, huh,
Mm.
why is this in a cartoon? Is this a bit iffy? Why is this a
Mm.
thing? It's a big thing out there. So just being aware of what you consume, questioning things, don't just blindly follow things. Like, stop to think for yourself. I think that's very important. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'll say in summary.
Oh, nice. Well, you kept it really concise. I like that. And I'll keep it concise. Really simple advice is travel and see the world for yourself. Um, that honestly, because there's something about travel that you see things with your own eyes, you smell things with your own nose, and you listen to things with your own ears, and your life is just forever changed. So and it's such a what can I say? It's like it's really a very strong barrier to media messaging. Like so like I hear of, you know, narratives about different cultures, but I'm somewhat, I wouldn't say, I want to say immune, but like when I hear that, it's like, no, I have a friend who's from this culture and they're not like this. I know someone from this religion and they're not like this. And I there's just it's just so great, and I'm very 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 thankful. And I know not everyone is able to do that, but if you are able to do that and you really want true authentic education of what's going on in the world, I really suggest just packing your bags and getting out there. So that's my message.
Nice and sweet. And I'll just say, guys, internet exists. And even though they might try to initially give you a rather biased view, just do a little more research. The internet out there has so much information nowadays. You'll be surprised. Type in something positive about a country and you will see how much comes up about the same thing. You know, don't type in
Mm,
Africa and starving children. Type in the wealthy in Africa or something like that.
yes, beautiful parts of Africa. Yeah, I
You'll
like
be
that.
surprised. You'll see something. Internet nowadays, there's so much information out there. So don't just limit yourself to what has been given to you or what you think has been given to you, because there's more out there. So
Amen. I like
I
this.
love I like this topic. There's still a lot more to discuss. I'm sure we'll come back to this topic and discuss more um,
Exactly.
in a part two. Um, but this is the end of this episode, guys. We are on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Music, Spotify. Please follow us on these, rate us, like us. We're also on Instagram. We will work on it. We're working on it. We're going to soon have a regular posting schedule. Please follow us on Instagram. DM us if you have any questions, if you have any things you'd like to discuss in regards to our episodes. What are your ideas on representation in the media? Would love to hear. We also have an email, thefeminineoutliers@gmail.com. So feel free to reach out to us should you wish to. We would love to interact more with you guys. And, until next time, have fun, guys. Live large. And don't be afraid to be an outlier.